Podcast Wydziału Historii Uniwersytetu Warszawskiego.
Historia na dwa głosy.
Faculty of History, University of Warsaw. My today's guest is Lorena Pérez Yarza. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, well, American pronunciation, Peninsular Spanish will be Pérez Yarza, but
okay.
There
so
are
we
more
have to
American
learn.
speakers.
We have to learn the American way of reading Spanish names.
Yes, it's easier because it's se instead of fe. So.
Okay, but we are not going to talk about Spain, but more about scholarship and your field of expertise. Tell me, what do you do in general, professional, and then directly what are you working on?
Okay. I am ancient historian and historian of religions with a focus on a cultural approach to cultural studies and also epigraphist information. I study stone inscriptions mainly. In Spain, I came from the old program, so we are together history and archaeology, and epigraphy is always in the middle. My formation is half archaeology, half history, and I have been using both aspects together for a long time. And it's always an approach, instead of theology in some countries or religious studies, like Christian studies, it's always an approach from the cultural point of view of ancient religions, the so-called paganism.
Yes. So everything before Christianity in the Latin West? Yes,
and cohabiting with early Christianity as well.
Okay.
Yes, I'm specialist actually of the latest stages of paganism.
And where did you study? What is the place where you got your formation?
I did my bachelor in Zaragoza, in Spain, in history with specialization in ancient history and epigraphy. And I have been working, I finished my career in Athens actually to deepen on classical archaeology and Byzantine archaeology and Greek epigraphy. And then I returned to Spain to do the master's, and I finished my Ph.D. also in Zaragoza. But later on I moved to the DAI in Munich with the Jacobi Stiftung, to Madrid, Carlos III, with a postdoc there, and I had been also an international fellow in Münster in Germany as well. And my research started with solar worship, not solar cult, so we like in Polish like cześć słońca and no cult solarni, because this point is like the cultural approach to different ways of solar veneration, interaction among different kinds of cults and different cultural traditions. And from there I started with migrants, the cult of migrants, the evolution of the cults, the integration of migrants in Pannonia, Germania, Gaul, Hispania, Italy. And from that I have been evolving into more cultural studies of religion and also deepening in epigraphic studies. Okay,
but in your research, did you start your research, for example, your PhD? It was just a question and the topic you wanted to investigate, and then you collected sources, or it was vice versa? First you got some information from sources and thought, what can we do with this? How do we deal with this?
My PhD was about the solar cult, the Roman solar cult in the western part of the Roman Empire.
In what period?
And the cultural implications of it from the evolution since Republican times into late antiquity. So it was the continuity of the cult of Sol, the Latin name for Ilios, and the separation with the Greek world, with Semitic solar traditions, and with the late antiquity traditions of solar worship. So understanding the common ground that was being created progressively, that's why Christians use, for instance, the solar halo for saints. The crown of kings is a solar symbol. The imperial propaganda. So was actually the question was about, was a soul cult in Rome and continued during all the period, or was, as traditional view, Oriental importation and a deformation of the traditional classical Roman religion? And the question was answered through the cultural studies, and you have on the one hand a continuity of the cult is attested in coins, inscriptions, philosophy, literary sources, but also cultural evolution, that when many cults enter in contact from different parts of the Roman Empire, they need to translate into Latin, and they use the iconography, the symbology, and the ideas of the solar cult of the Romans, which was never principal, and at the same time you create a new oikumene, cultural globalization, ancient globalization that created the post-classic world of the Roman Empire.
Okay, did I remember correct that some explanations for the date of Christmas is related to the cult of Sol?
And this is totally related with that. It's like there is a permanent non-solved question, because traditionally in the 19th century they thought that all the Christian festivities had a pagan precedent and they were just substituting, and therefore they found, okay, we have a Saturnalia and the Dies Sol Invicti, which is the 25th, and therefore Christianity was just trying to supplant them. But the problem is the earlier attestations that are not totally direct of Christianity are a bit earlier than the first attestations of the festivity of Sol, because it's a late invention, and therefore we have a problem here, and it seems more of a mixed ground that created both festivities that rather one copying the other.
So not the direction borrowing of the date one from another, but generally sense of make a fest during this last days.
Romans didn't like many times to have big festivities with the solar patterns of the year. They have other logics. The original festivity of Sol was 9th, 10th of August, which is nowadays Saint Lawrence Day, and in some countries like in Spain, Lorenzo is called Sun, so there is like a relation there, but festivities in Roman time changed, and Christianity festivities changed. We also have the proposal of Armenians of the 6th of January for Christmas, so it's not really clear, and at the end is you can believe all the versions at the same time or think they were trying just negotiating and they ended up being in the same moment, and of course having some influence each other, but nobody was the original or like the inventor, like the baklava. We don't know who invented the baklava. Can be Turkish, the slaves of the palace,
it is a cultural
Syrians.
History, yes.
Exactly.
And in your dissertation, what was the main material of sources? What did you work with? The textual, epigraphical, iconographical material? What was the dominant, the major one?
It was a triad between literary sources, mainly from the purpose of cultural background, epigraphic sources, and numismatics. And in the interrelation between the three, you could see the trends. Like even coins show you the Temple of Sol in the Circus Maximus in the 2nd century, and the literary sources inform you that it was an Vetus Aedis, an ancient temple during the burning of Rome with Nero, but also that there was certain abandonment of the cult according to the epigraphic evidence. So it's like a permanent memory but not active cult, and at the same time you have a continuous evidence, and you need to mix all the things.
But at the end, did you what were the results of your investigation? Was it that Sol was important or secondary, or it was the period it was more important, less important? How can you make it a summary?
That the cult of Sol Invictus is a modern construct, and there were several cults of Sol: Oriental, not Oriental, Celtic, Latin, the Greek one of Ilios, and there is a historical continuity in the Roman world, but the solar worship as a veneration gained prominence in passing into the late antiquity, and in that prominence many cults that were minority became more solar, and solar elements permeated the culture. So we have philosophy being more solar, the Neoplatonism used more solar allegories than Plato, the emperors were using progressively more solar elements, Septimius Severus is using totally like a halo of Sol, and the emperors like Luna, so it was a progressive cultural construction, but the Roman cult had continuity. So we cannot say it was an invention by the Semitics that came and degraded the traditional
it got
religion.
More and more importance.
Yes, exactly.
But how can you explain this development, that it became so?
Because we have an increase of all the references to different ways of solar worship that appears in public propaganda of the emperors, in the poems, in the philosophical references, in the coinage. We have coin of Sol since the Second Punic War, but there is an increase in the 3rd century. At the same moment, we have also an increase of solar references in many cults. Not only the Mithraic cult, but many other gods were having solar traits specific from Palmyra, Emesa, and at the same time, other gods that were never solar were suddenly solarized. Like Men is a lunar god, and in the 3rd century appears a couple of times with the solar halo. So it was like...
But is it just that the new cult, which is a kind of a, let's say, synchronistic solar cult, because it got more impact from outside Roman world, and this is what it explains the career of the soul cult, or is it so the reason why it became so...
The issue is that there is like several explanations that reinforce each other, because there was a natural growing in philosophical terms. For instance, Cicero, referencing the Natura Deorum and the ancient traditions of philosophers, start reflecting that the perfect same is the sphere, the God is perfect, so doesn't lose materia, so it emanates, and the light is superior, so and a sphere that is perfect, that emanates light, is only the soul, only sun. And there is a natural growing in many discourses that also found like a mirror or a receptive audience in many local cults, like the ones from Emesa, and that's why they gained popularity, because in the sense that one thing helped the other. But
do you think that the local cult can be created on the philosophical reflections? Is it that the people in the countryside just read Cicero and say, no, that's interesting?
You see that many poems were using solar elements and comparing the emperor with the sun. The emperors were using solar elements. The chariot races that were ultra popular, more than gladiatorial games many times, they had in the meta, in the finish line, they have the Temple of Sol, who was starting calling me Victor, like Hercules, and therefore we have Sol Invictus from there. So it was like a cultural shift, a cultural sensitivity towards solar elements that make all solar elements in different cults more popular.
And was it used by the emperors for their propaganda as a vehicle for showing the emperor as a sun? This is the kind what you did find?
It is not clear, because Augustus used the solar crown, although he never used Sol, but he also dedicated the obelisks of the Circus Maximus, who were for Sol, not for Apollo, and they were terribly important for the victory. But when the emperors start developing more the idea of victorious, paccator orbis, restorer of the Orden, or the order of the world, the solar imagery and the solar symbology looked better in the propaganda, and they start copying more elements of solar propaganda, and therefore it was like a kind of Sonnenkult in German, like a solar cult intertwined with the imperial cult, but as a result of a cultural change, and also because it was convenient. The center of the world is the sun, the center of the empire is the emperor.
I just would like to return to the sources. If you studied literary text, epigraphy, and coins on numismatic, it means that the main information of of sources comes from the upper part of the society. But by studying this, can you shed light on the notion about the god by the normal people, so that who are not literary, who just were the simple people living in the towns or countryside?
Like with many cults, it's difficult, because sometimes you need to be careful with the sources, as you said, but we have some indices, because we also see the statuettes of gods that are really heterogeneous, and Sol appear many times. Well, in this case will be Sol Ilios, because it's the same iconography. And at the end of the 2nd century, for instance, the image of the charioteer Ilios, that was like a cosmic sun, it's super popular. Not only in coins of the emperors, but also in the lamps, oil lamps, and small terracotta figurines, bronze figurines, and appears in all the empire. So people were familiar with this iconography, so probably they saw it and had it in the houses. Yes, and even the first comedians of the Latin world reading the Republic were mentioned Sol for the big audience, so it has been always something that people knew, and also people going to the Circus Maximus, not reading Cicero, for instance, but they see that the victory is reaching the Temple of Sun, of the Sun. So this is like it was affecting the literary discourse of the elite. At the same time, the imagery of Sun which is not necessarily the cult, that's the point, was also affecting the let's say the general culture of the population.
Oh, that's interesting. And then, so it was your PhD in Spain. Then you had a postdoc position in Germany, if I'm correct. Where did in Münster, right?
In Munich first. I returned to Spain and then in Münster.
Okay, and what did you do in those places?
There I was passing already to the cult of migrants. So I passed from the Latin cult of the sun, Sol, to the different solar cults of the minorities, and how also other like intercultural dialogues from the religious point of view always, of how different gods passed from Syria into Africa, Pannonia or Italy, and they evolved, and many times they were even adopted by local communities, so it was not anymore an ethnic cult. And I started studying Palmyrenian cults, the cult of Elagabalus, and also the Jupiter Dolicanus cult. There is a big center, the Institute of Asia Minor in Münster, that is responsible for excavating Doliche, which is the sacred center of the cult. But we see many cases in Britannia, Germania, and Pannonia.
And did you find this other people who migrated to the Roman Empire as innovative in the culting or creation or expression of their beliefs?
Yes. For instance, I'm not the only one saying this. The religious system of Palmyra seems to change when the migrants express themselves in Rome, not only because they use Latin epigraphy, even if it's in Greek and Aramaic, but also because they change the triads and the order of gods. And Malak Bel seems to be much more important, who is the messenger of Bel, but also a solar god with a local origin. And it seems to be really important in Dacia, in Rome, and in Africa. So there is like, the cults have the same names, but the structure changes a little bit. And some cults even became not of the city, but pan-Syrian. And then you have the Assyria appearing. The Assyria makes sense if you're Assyrian outside of Syria, because inside Syria is the dea of a city. And in Dacia you have even the changes with several rounds of the god of Dolicanus became Roman, adopted by Roman soldiers. Then the Roman soldiers of Syrian origin readopted it and call it Deoco Magnorum. So they make it Syrian again. So it was like a cultural renegotiation. It's the same thing we have in the US, in America, with the reinventing of African tradition by Afro-Americans, that they create a new eclectic melange of African elements that don't make sense in Africa, but make sense in the Afro-American context.
Okay, so that's but and still this epigraphy was the main or one of the main sources.
Yes, because we don't have literary sources from this kind of local elites, for instance, or migrants with some money to express themselves, but they had enough money to put altars, for instance, to the gods.
Okay, and this is just after the German episode you came to Poland, or?
Yes, after the German, after Münster.
Okay,
yes.
And now you work with a team led by Paweł Nowakowski, our colleague, who is a PI, what is the principal investigator of the ERC grant, and what the project is about.
It's a project purely about epigraphy. It's about the production of inscriptions, tracing the processes of creating, devising, designing the inscription, and trying to trace down the creators, the material creators of the pieces. And for me it was really interesting because the Spanish school of epigraphy works from the point of view of material many times, not only the text. We love to do autopsies, which is like, instead of the autopsy of a body, is the autopsy of the stone, and you study the carving, the lining, the alignment, etc., which is extra information that complements the text.
And it is a Spanish speciality?
It's a characteristic of Italian and Spanish schools of epigraphy. And Latin epigraphy tends to be more focused on material, also because the texts are smaller. And Greek epigraphy traditionally, and epigraphy from the UK, etc., which many times doesn't have direct access to the stones, it tends to focus more on the philological interpretation of the texts.
Okay, so materiality counts. This is something important.
Yes, and I always had the problem of contextualizing the pieces to understand how it was produced. It was like a commission and then moved and then finished in a different part. And this project with Paweł Nowakowski, it's a perfect opportunity to doing that, because it's not only about religious inscriptions, it's about funerary inscriptions, the common people, not only the elite, but also how to understand ancient culture creating public texts.
And do you think that by examining stones with the inscriptions of physical materiality of the inscriptions, can you understand or feel or see the stone cutter, the person who was working with the stone?
It's difficult, and the aim of this project is precisely devising a methodology to doing that. But we have some traces. Sometimes you have a little guidelines of the ordinatio, which is where to write. That already informs you that the stone was not just written, like carved without care. It was like prepare the format, prepare the lines, and then carved. You have problems of copying the text, or passing from a pseudo draft into the carving, but also spelling mistakes, which informs about the everyday language influencing the literary language. But also sometimes we have interesting processes, such as the titles of the gods are done separately from the body of the text, and you see that in some places, like in Bordeaux, in funerary epigraphy, the Dismaribus, which are the funerary gods of the Romans, they were important, but in the inscription they were secondary, because it was just like a formular idea, and they ended relegated in the top of the CP, for instance, and they ended up produced by the carvers of the stone, and then the text was done by a different person. So it informs you even about the conceptualization of things, and we
so
see
at least two people working with this.
Yes, and in some places you even can see, for instance, that the dating is put below. So even if it's the same person, the inscription was prepared, then was erected, the stone, and then was put the date in the moment of the commemoration. In other cases, you have interesting interplays and people confusing gods, or the epigrapher who did inscription separating words to make clear that it's two different gods, because we have the Dios Curios, like the Zeus, but you have the Dioscuri, which are the twins of Zeus. And in some inscriptions in Attica, they separate with space, and this is like the epigrapher helping the reader and also doing things that the commissioner will never think about it. So you have also the process between the dedicant thinking about an idea, the framing of the text with a change of the message sometimes, and then the result, which is what the reader sees.
And the team is working in both Latin and Greek epigraphy?
Yes.
Okay, and what are, just to our audience, what are the numbers of the inscriptions you had to check the material?
A lot. The issue is that we have to check many inscriptions to have few results, because many times you need to check 200 inscriptions to trace 10 inscriptions that show you clearly that there is a worship, like the same production. Sometimes you even see...
But 200 is still not a big number, but what is the value of how many...
It depends how much time you take doing the analysis of an inscription.
Let's imagine that this project takes 5 years. How many inscriptions will you read during this time? It is about 10,000 or...
No, we are speaking about a bit less than 10,000. The issue here is we need images, because without image you cannot trace the letter shapes.
Because of a material aspect.
Exactly. But also a proper analysis of an inscription from material point of view, text organization, the use of formulae, takes you more than 1 day. So imagine you analyze 300 inscriptions, is more than 1 year of work.
But do you think that artificial intelligence can help? Can you upload to some chat photographs of those inscriptions? Ask, show me the pattern, for example. Did someone do this?
This is a big debate now in epigraphy. We have a specialist, Valentina Miñosa, coming to Warsaw in October to explain the advances in this field. It's problematic because the AI have training to work with texts but already passed to the computer. When they have to read the inscription, it's difficult because you need a big pool of data to train the AI, but we don't have a lot of inscriptions of the same context, of the same type. So you are mixing context, and therefore the machine cannot differentiate nuances, different meanings or types of letters. And that's the problem. And now the challenge is manage a machine to read an image and understand properly the letters without confusing the scratches and deviations of letter shapes, and give you a text with sense.
So still the human eye is more precise.
Yes.
Okay, so you will look at the photos or the objects in museums for the next month or years.
Yes.
Okay.
We still have a job.
Is it a team? So you are working now in 4, if I'm correct, or 5?
Yes.
4.
Well, we are 4 and Pavel 5. Yes.
And do you find it interesting to work within the team, or you prefer to work on your own? So you have your own data and you have your own research questions, or is it any dynamic for teamwork you find interesting?
For me, one of the appealing points of applying to this project was because Pavel has from the beginning the idea of a work team, a team effort, and for me it's really necessary because you need to exchange information. Nobody knows everything about Greek and Latin formulaic inscriptions, formulaic nuances, calligraphy, paleography. It's impossible. And so we develop together methodology, we discuss difficult cases, we construct together the database, and then we assign the surveys in different areas, and we share the data. And so it's work team. We have a specific part we work alone, of course, but we are even producing together some papers with methodology, description, and I think it's better because this is the difference between archaeology and history. We tend to work more separately, but it reaches a point that if you are comparing, let's say, Aramaic inscription with Greek inscription in a Latin context, who knows well Aramaic, Greek, and Latin archaeology? It's impossible. You need to collaborate with someone, and when you are doing a survey across all the Roman Empire from the 3rd century until the 6th, you need a team effort.
That is interesting because when you were talking about this form-like forms in the inscription, I recall the lecture I was attending to a colleague of ours from Poznań saying that in the 6th or 5th century cuneiform text written about judgment, he found that some parts of text were written earlier in the cuneiform, and the gaps were filled in on the end by the proper scribe. So it was the 2 hands at least. So the similar case as you have the epigrapher stone cutter.
That's really interesting, and I mean it makes sense because they also do a team effort. It was a workshop, an oficina, probably more than one person working there. Also, it depends of the context. It's not the same working in Antioch, Alexandria, or Rome, or working in a small village in the center of Gaul, in modern day France. So the context is always important, the moment of history, but yes, for sure. And we have many cases also of potential 2 hands. So the text is started by someone with a beautiful alignment, something that looks like a title, and then the end of the inscription goes a bit worse.
It will be a tricky question. Can you argue that such a project for 5 people, a lot of work about stone cutters of Greek and Roman times in antiquity really matters? Why should we study ancient times at all?
It depends on the topic, but many times ancient history, medieval studies, they give you a window to the past, but also to understand the humans better, how they act, why they act. And yes, history never repeats exactly, but human mechanisms of dealing with crises or dealing with change or dealing with the problem how to express yourself in public, they repeat. So there's similar situations, social situations, different vocabulary or repertoire. And in antiquity, we see, for instance, the beginning of the process. You go nowadays to a graveyard and you have the shop with stele prepared, and you can buy it, and it has already some part of the text engraved. It has a shape, and you choose like a market. This is the result of the late antiquity, for instance. So many times you understand better from where things came and how they were created and how things changed.
So you see that the contemporary culture is rooted in ancient times, and we continue different aspects.
And also about dealing with migration, for instance. And
very important topic now.
Yes. You understand the cultural identity of people being created, being transformed already in antiquity. You have now the problem with some communities changing their perception of their own religion, or radicalizing, or changing the understanding of their place of origin, or even mixing it, like Pan-Africanism outside of Africa. We have the same in antiquity. We have Pan-Syrianism outside of Syria. We have people becoming more Roman, but also transforming Syrian elements or Egyptian elements, but also Romans adopting Isis, and Isis looks like a totally Roman entity in Pompeii, for instance, in the Temple of Isis. We do the same with Buddha, like the Buddhism modern times or the yoga modern times in the West doesn't have to do many times anything
with the original.
Yeah. So humans became with similar mechanisms, and studying the past help us study the present.
Okay, maybe those who will give grants to ancient scholars will understand this way. Did you know a lot about Polish scholarship before coming to Warsaw, or did you know Polish scholars or their work?
I knew about the Polish missions in Egypt. Actually, the Temple of the Boat that is in Madrid was excavated by the Polish archaeologists. But I knew a little bit the University of Warsaw. But I think in general there is not a lot of knowledge about the Polish academia and Polish scholars, and I didn't know it. And when I arrived here, I discovered a thrilling life of scholars, especially papyrologists and epigraphies and scholars of religions, with 2 beautiful seminars that they change ideas. They even start attracting people from abroad. And I think it will be worth it for people to pay more attention to Polish Academy and Warsaw University. Yeah.
And when you compare what you see in the scholarship in University of Warsaw and those places in Germany you were in, Spanish, do you see any difference that here archaeologists, epigraphers or historians in Poland approach the material differently, or is it the same way as you know from the West?
The question should be changed, because it's not Poland versus the rest. It's like you discover that different countries do differently, and Poland is not unique on that. It's also different. Because
you said that Spanish approach to epigraphy is concentrated on material, so
yes,
it is a
like
Spanish-Italian way of doing this. So maybe did you find any Polish aspect of those?
Yes, but it's for instance, Northern Europeans tend to be less focused on archaeology in comparison, but you have really strong tradition of archaeology in Poland. There is also really good epigraphists, old school, but also with new mechanics of reading in Poland. Epigraphy is dying, for instance, in the UK, and now when they read inscriptions, they need help from people from abroad. The tradition of Greek philology, papyrology, etc., it's really good here. It's not so much in other countries. Spain has less tradition of Greek papyrology, for instance. So it's everyone is different, but also they can complement each other. That's why international teams are a beautiful thing to have
and work well.
Yes.
Okay, Lorena, can we imagine the optimistic scenario that the team of this ERC project will finish with the good results, and let's say in 5 or 10 years, what would be the most expected and hope for position? What would you like to do in the future?
The good thing of this project is that it doesn't need to study all the inscriptions we want to study to have impactful results, because it's about the methodology. We discovered that there is no terminology, there is no words many times to explain the letter shapes, for instance, and to compare different styles. And we had to lose, inverted commas, so because we didn't lose, we win time researching on that. and we have created a methodology that we are now applying that can have a lot of impact if other people use it, because it's giving solution to problems that not only have, that it's a problem that many people in many places have. I'm going to Portugal this summer because a colleague from Lisbon asked us for help to restudy Lusitanian inscriptions, which is a really obscure language from Portugal. It's believed to be in relation with Celtic language, but it's not clear if it's Celtic. And the paleography is related by the Latin one of the area, and the dating can be improved. We can know more about the chronology thanks to the methodology we are doing and comparing properly letters, because we have the tools. So the tools of this project, the methodology, can be really important.
And you will you will not show, but also give to the scholarship around the new tool to understand the inscriptions.
Yes,
right?
And that's the plan. And we will put it in the open access in the database. We are also in talk with the University of Oxford, Bordeaux, and Mainz, and others to create a group of networking about precisely paleography. And soon an open access book will appear with that, and it's like international dialogue about these kind of problems. So we are already
okay, so we will have the product just to show.
Yes.
Okay, finger crossed that everything was fine. And then let's go back to your ideal position in 5 years, or
I don't know. I like the idea of returning to Spain with a permanent position, but I don't mind ending with a permanent position in other part of Europe. So for me, it's not a problem. It will be more about finding the right fit, the right university, because through teamwork you realize that sometimes the environment is more important. Here we have a really good environment in ancient history. It's really comfortable to work. You can speak with people. You can ask for help. You can exchange ideas. So if you go, whatever the cost to a place that has a horrible environment, that's a lose. So I am looking for a permanent position, but in a place with good environment.
So the people are more important than walls.
Yes. Totally agree.
Still, the epigrapher who is focusing on stones are important more
because the people behind the stone is important people. Okay,
so this is what about. Okay, so another question about your research field. I ask in many episodes the question, is there anything you will like to have been examined? Not necessarily by yourself, but for example, do you see that there's a gap in research, that we would be happy to have a book on such and such topic? Or is there anything you would be happy to be investigated in your research?
Yes, I will love to, from my field, which is religious studies, proper research about the evolution of late paganism and separating centuries, because we have a really close idea of what is classical world, and therefore there is no change for 400 years. I mean, just think how was Europe 400 years ago. It was totally different. So in the Roman world was the same, and it's really important to understand the modern world, because there is a big change in paganism, and there is a tendency to create a specific vocabulary of mystery cults, mysterization. But those are not mystery cults.
But you mean paganism in the sense that non-Christian religions?
Exactly, but it also affects Christianity, because there was a change in the sensitivity from the 2nd to the 4th century. And this change in sensitivity is the background against the which Christianity emerged. So to understand properly Christianity, modern times, but also religion in general, we need to understand this change first, and not focus only in the classical sources from the 1st century, Republican times, Augustus. And
obviously
Caesar.
We know a lot about this non-Christian religions through the Christian writers who did not like the pagan, so-called pagan, so we for centuries probably were a little bit biased by the Christian view. And now this is something you would like to be more...
Because there is a discourse about creating mystery cults, but not by modern scholars. In the 3rd century, Romans had the fashion of creating new ways of calling the local cults, the public cults, the festivities, and it's the same language the Christians took, and that's why in Greek they say mysterion, or the mysteries for the sacraments, or Eastern, And it's something that came from that moment. It's a moment in which people wanted to see religion in a different way, more personal, more about specific individual access to the sacred knowledge, and it's something that appears in that moment.
So maybe we can, paradoxically, we should apply to the Christian church, saying we should be founded to explore and know more about pagan religion to understand better the roots of Christianity.
Yes. Because the comparison should be with Cicero and Caesar, but with the sources of the 3rd century. Yes.
Okay, this is something I cross fingers that someone will do it finally. Maybe with the sources of money coming from the church would be nice. Okay. Yes. So thank you for the conversation. I look for your result of research, and all the best for our audience.
Thank you very much.